Three people walk into a bank on the exact same day. The first one grew up believing that if you worked hard, stayed loyal, and kept your head down, the company would take care of you for life. The second one grew up watching that promise get shredded, literally watching their parents get laid off, so they trusted no one and quietly built a fortress. And the third one graduated straight into the worst financial crash in 80 years, drowning in student debt, convinced the whole game was rigged from the start. Same country, same economy, same bank, three completely different brains when it comes to money. Now here's the question that's going to keep you watching for the next 18 minutes. If you handed each of these three people the exact same $100,000, who would still have it and who would have grown it 10 years later? Because the answer is not what you think. It's not the oldest one with the most experience. It's not the youngest one with the most technology. The truth is stranger, and honestly, it says something uncomfortable about all of us. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why each generation is wired the way it is, which one is genuinely winning with money right now, and most importantly, which habits you should steal from each of them, no matter how old you are. So let's settle this. Boomers, Gen X, Millennials. Who actually handles money best? Let's get into it. No. And if you believe that, you're going to lose this argument at every family dinner for the rest of your life. Here's the real answer, and it comes from psychology, not stereotypes. There's a concept researchers call your formative economic memory. The idea is simple but powerful. The way the economy behaved when you were roughly 18 to 25 years old gets burned into your brain permanently. Whatever money felt like when you were becoming an adult becomes your default setting for the rest of your life. Think about it like this. If you learned to swim in calm, warm water, you'll always feel relaxed in a pool. But if you nearly drowned the first time you got in, you can become a great swimmer. But a part of you will always tense up near the deep end. Money works the same way. So the question isn't who's smarter. The question is, what water did each generation learn to swim in? And once you understand that, everything, the saving, the spending, the risk-taking, the fear, suddenly makes perfect sense. Let's go generation by generation. And I promise, by the third one, you're going to see all three in a completely new light. Let's start with the baby boomers, born roughly between 1946 and 1964. Here's a question you've probably never asked. Why are boomers so confident about money, sometimes to the point that it drives their kids crazy? The answer is that boomers learned to swim in the warmest water in modern economic history. They came of age during the greatest sustained boom the world had ever seen. Jobs were plentiful. A single income could buy a house. College was cheap, in some cases almost free. And here's the big one. The price of a home compared to the average salary was a fraction of what it is today. So when a boomer says, "I worked a summer job and paid for a year of college," they're not lying. They're not even exaggerating. That was genuinely their reality. The problem is they learned one lesson from it that no longer applies. The belief that the system rewards effort in a straight, predictable line. Work hard, get promoted, buy the house, retire comfortably. Now let me ask you the uncomfortable question. Does that make boomers good with money or just lucky with timing? The honest answer is both, and it's worth separating the two. On the good with money side, boomers built genuinely strong habits. They're the generation most likely to own their home outright. They tend to carry less anxiety about spending, which, believe it or not, is a financial superpower, because financial anxiety causes people to make panicked, expensive mistakes. And they lived through real interest rates you can barely imagine today. So many of them understand the raw power of compounding in their bones. But here's the twist, and this is where it gets interesting. That same confidence has a dark side. Because boomers learned that the system generally works, a lot of them underestimate modern risks. Some are dangerously underprepared for how expensive long-term care and healthcare have become. Studies have repeatedly shown that a large share of boomers have far less saved for retirement than they'll actually need. Confidence, it turns out, can quietly become complacency. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine a driver who learned to drive on empty country roads in the 1970s. Incredible instincts, totally relaxed behind the wheel, but drop them into modern rush-hour traffic, and that relaxed confidence can become a liability. That's the boomer relationship with money. World-class instincts trained on a road that no longer exists. So what should you steal from boomers? 3 things. First, their comfort with spending money guilt-free on things that matter, because chronic money guilt is its own kind of poverty. Second, their loyalty to long-term compounding. They don't panic sell. And third, their belief that homeownership, when you can swing it, is a foundation and not a trap. Boomers scored their points. Hold that thought, because the next generation learned to swim in water that was a lot colder. Now we get to the generation almost everyone forgets. Generation X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980. And here's a genuine question. When was the last time you heard a news headline about Gen X and money? Probably never. And that right there is the single most important clue to understanding them. Gen X is the forgotten middle child of the generational family. Too young to catch the easy boomer boom, too old to be blamed for everything like millennials. And that invisibility shaped their entire financial psychology. So what water did Gen X learn to swim in? Cold, choppy, and unpredictable. They entered adulthood as the golden promise their parents believed in was quietly being dismantled. This is the generation that watched the pension, the guaranteed monthly check for life, get replaced by the 401k, where suddenly the risk landed squarely on you. They watched their parents get laid off in waves of corporate downsizing, learning early and painfully that company loyalty was a one-way street. Now let me ask you the question that unlocks this whole generation. If you grew up watching the safety net get pulled away, what would you become? You'd become self-reliant to the point of stubbornness. You'd trust institutions less and trust yourself more. You'd become the generation psychologists literally nicknamed the latchkey kids, the ones who came home to an empty house and learned to figure it out alone. And that childhood independence turned into a very specific money personality. Skeptical, private, and quietly, relentlessly self-sufficient. Here's what almost nobody talks about. When you actually look at the data, Gen X is doing something remarkable. Many surveys show Gen X carrying the highest household incomes of any generation right now because they're in their peak earning years. But they're also carrying the heaviest load. Mortgages, teenagers heading to college, and aging parents who need help. They are the definition of the sandwich generation, squeezed financially from both sides at once. And yet, this is the part that surprised me, they keep grinding, mostly in silence. They're not posting their budgets online. They're not going viral with money tips. They're just handling it. Let me give you an analogy. If boomers are the relaxed country road driver, Gen X is the person who learned to drive during a snowstorm. They're tense, sure. They double-check everything. They don't fully trust the road. But hand them a difficult situation, and they are shockingly, almost annoyingly competent, because difficulty is the only condition they've ever known. But here's the honest weakness, because every generation has one. That same skepticism can make Gen X overly cautious. Some sat out of the market during huge growth years because they simply didn't trust it, having been burned before. Their independence, which is their greatest strength, can occasionally cost them by keeping them from asking for help or taking smart risks. So what should you steal from Gen X? Their radical self-reliance, the refusal to depend on any single employer or any single income stream. Their skepticism of too good to be true. They smell a scam from a mile away. And above all, their quiet consistency. They don't need applause to keep doing the right thing month after month after month. Keep score. Because now we arrive at the most argued about, most misunderstood generation of them all, Millennials, born roughly between 1981 and 1996. And I already know what half of you are thinking. Here we go, avocado toast, right? Stay with me, because the real story is going to flip that stereotype completely on its head. Let's ask the water question one more time. What did millennials learn to swim in? A hurricane. Many of them graduated from college, often carrying record-breaking student debt, and walked directly into the 2008 global financial crisis. Imagine spending your late teens being told, "Get a degree and you'll be fine," then getting that degree just as the entire economy collapsed and the jobs vanished. So let me ask you the question that reveals everything. If the two things you were told were safe, going to college and buying a house, both blew up right in front of you, what would you believe about money? You'd believe the traditional rules are broken. You'd be deeply suspicious of safe advice, and you'd become obsessed with two things: flexibility and information. And that's exactly what the data shows. Here's the myth buster. The stereotype says millennials are frivolous spenders. The research says almost the opposite. Millennials are, in many studies, the most financially cautious young generation in decades. They actually start saving for retirement earlier than previous generations did at the same age. They're skeptical of debt. They research everything obsessively before buying. The reason it looks like they spend recklessly is that the two biggest wealth builders of the past, homes and stable careers, got priced out of reach, so the money that used to go toward a mortgage goes toward experiences and rent instead. Let me put it bluntly, millennials didn't stop buying houses because they bought too much coffee. The math on that has been debunked over and over. They struggled to buy houses because home prices exploded while wages stayed flat. That's not a spending problem. That's an arithmetic problem. Now, the strengths, and they're real. Millennials are the most financially literate generation when it comes to information access. They'll compare investment options, read the reviews, and use apps to automate their savings without even thinking about it. They pioneered mainstream conversations about money that older generations considered taboo, talking openly about salaries, side hustles, and investing. And they're comfortable with new tools and new asset classes in a way that gives them serious long-term flexibility. Here's an analogy. If Gen X learned to drive in a snowstorm, millennials learned to drive in a storm, but with a smartphone, live traffic data, and 3 navigation apps running at once. They have more information than any generation in history. The danger? Sometimes all that information leads to paralysis, or to chasing every shiny new trend, or to comparing themselves to curated highlight reels online and feeling like they're constantly falling behind. And that comparison trap is the real millennial weakness. Not laziness, not entitlement. It's a generation drowning in information and social pressure, sometimes making anxious, impulsive moves because everyone online seems to be winning except them. So what should you steal from millennials? Their willingness to talk about money out loud, which kills shame, and shame is expensive. Their instinct to automate savings so willpower isn't even required. And their openness to new tools instead of clinging to the way it's always been done. All right, 3 generations, 3 completely different brains. Now for the part you actually clicked on. So, who actually handles money best? Here's where I have to be honest with you, and it's more interesting than just naming one winner, because the answer depends entirely on how you keep score. If you're scoring by pure wealth accumulated, boomers win, and it's not close, but a huge chunk of that is timing, not skill. They bought assets when assets were cheap. Give any generation those prices and they'd look like geniuses too. If you're scoring by resilience, thriving under difficult, unfair conditions, then Gen X quietly takes the crown. They got the least help, faced a collapsing safety net, and still built strong, stable financial lives without a single headline celebrating them. Pound for pound, adjusting for the difficulty setting they were handed, Gen X might be the most impressive of all. And if you're scoring by financial habits and literacy, the actual behaviors that predict long-term success, then millennials are genuinely leading. They save earlier, research harder, automate smarter, and talk about money more openly than any generation before them. They're playing on the hardest map with the best skills. So let me ask you directly. Does that mean there's no single winner? Actually, no. There is a winner. But it's not a generation. The winner is the person, and it could be you, watching right now, who steals the best habit from all 3. Take the boomers' calm, guilt-free confidence and their patience with compounding. Add the Gen X refusal to depend on anyone but yourself, that quiet, unshakable consistency. Then layer on the millennials' love of information, automation, and open conversation. That combination, boomer patience, Gen X grit, millennial literacy, is a financial profile that would absolutely crush it in any economy, in any decade. And the beautiful part? Your birth year doesn't lock you out of any of it. These are habits. Habits can be learned at any age. So let's bring it all the way back to those 3 people who walked into the bank. The boomer trained on warm water and easy roads. The Gen Xer forged in the snowstorm, trusting no one but themselves. And the millennial, navigating the hurricane with a phone full of apps and a mountain of information. None of them is broken. None of them is stupid. Each one is just a perfect reflection of the world that shaped them. And once you see that, you can stop judging the other generations and start learning from them. Here's my honest challenge to you before you go. Look at your own money habits and ask, which generation do I actually act like? Because most of us are running on default settings we never consciously chose, settings installed by the economy we grew up in. And the moment you can see those settings clearly is the moment you get to change them. Now, I genuinely want to hear from you, because this next part decides the debate. Drop a comment and tell me 2 things: which generation you're from, and which generation you think really handles money best. I read the comments, and the arguments on this topic are always incredible. If this changed how you see your parents, your kids, or honestly yourself, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people. And subscribe, because next, I'm going deep on the one generation everybody forgot, the full psychology of Gen X, and why their money habits are so different from everyone else's. You do not want to miss that one. 3 generations, 1 economy, and now you know exactly how to beat all 3 of them at their own game. I'll see you in the next one.